course, the most important objective behind this is to ensure the protection of the environment and public health related to such shipments of waste. Um, the regulation regulates shipments between EU countries, but also the import and the export to and from the EU. And most waste is covered by this regulation. There are a few exemptions, such as nuclear waste, very specific types of material that are covered by specific legislation. But for the rest, most, if not all, waste is covered. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the main purpose of this regulation, of the current regulation, is to set up procedures, and that's the prior informed consent procedure, which many of you know from the Basel Convention. And this is provided for in this regulation in a bit more detail. The controls that are to be applied depend on what type of waste you have before you, because as you know, the Basel Convention covers hazardous and some other types of waste, but in our EU waste shipment regulation, we cover all waste, also the green listed waste, the non-hazardous waste. So depending on what characteristic your waste has, is it hazardous or not, what destination will it have? Is it a country that is in the OECD or not? And what is the final treatment operation? Is it a landfill or is it the recycling, for instance? And that would lead you to one of the procedural regimes in this regulation. As I said, we also regulate green listed waste, and there we have general information requirements, which basically means a set of information has to accompany the transport. For instance, where does the waste originate from? What is its destination? What is the waste exactly? Who is carrying the waste? The amounts, etc. So that's not really a prior consent procedure. It's just a requirement to have the shipment accompanied with information. Hazardous waste, or for instance, the mixed plastic waste that was recently incorporated into the Basel Convention, that is covered by the prior written notification and consent procedure. And also all waste that is destined for landfill, whatever the characteristic, is subject to this prior notification procedure. We also implement since long the ban amendment, the export ban under Basel, and that means that we prohibit all the export of hazardous waste outside the OECD, and as well all waste that would be directed to landfilling. We also prohibit those shipments outside the Union. Next slide, please. Just some figures to illustrate what is the situation that we started working from when reviewing our waste shipment regulation. As you can see, over the years, we've always, as an European Union, have been importing a lot of waste. We have treatment capacity available, and that attracted waste to be imported. But as you can also see, since a few decades, the export of waste has been steadily increasing. And at the moment, almost 33 million tons of waste are exported. Not so much the hazardous waste, but a lot of non-hazardous waste, like metal scrap and plastic waste and textile waste, is being exported from the Union. And also some figures are there for the year 2020. A lot of value is related to that. The import of waste is approximately has a value of over 13 billion euros. And at the same time, the waste that is exported has a similar value, but a much larger amount is exported. Half of the exports of waste from the EU are destined to non-OECD countries. And I will come in the next slide to some of the challenges that are related to this. Can you, next slide, please? This is just to illustrate a breakup in waste streams. So as you can see, iron and steel scrap is by far the largest stream that is exported, but also imported, and that's of course because of the weight that is with this waste. But also paper and cardboard, plastics, copper, and other non-ferrous metal scrap is being exported. Um, when looking at our review, reviewing the current regulation, we could not incorporate or look at all possible waste streams. So we made a selection of the most exported and imported waste streams. And so we took 6 waste streams and gathered data for on them. And that is the ferrous and non-ferrous scrap, the paper waste, plastic waste, and the textile waste. And also the glass waste, we had good data, so we also took them into account. Other wastes were not in detail considered, but of course the whole reasoning behind our review also took them into account in the final proposal that we did. Next slide, please. So what I will now do is quickly explain the main challenge that we found when evaluating our regulation and looking at the global developments regarding the shipment of waste. And then we found basically 3 main blocks of challenges, and we grouped them: intra-EU shipments, the export of waste from the European Union, and the illegal trafficking of waste, which is a phenomenon that we see both within the EU, but also, of course, the export of waste often is happening illegally. So for shipments within the EU, what we found is that a lot of waste is still not directed to recycling or even preparation for reuse. While as we want to go to a more circular economy, we felt that this regulation is not sufficiently supporting this transition to a circular economy. Waste should be, the shipment of waste should be facilitated in order to have that waste recycled rather than have it incinerated or landfilled. And what we saw is that at the moment we still have a paper-based approach in the waste shipment regulation. So a lot of paperwork has to be done. A lot of stamps, signatures have to be put on papers, and they have to be physically sent around. And that is not helping to have an efficient implementation of the rules. Also, and that is an internal EU issue, but I think this is also globally a challenge. The way the rules are interpreted and implemented is not always harmonized. There's a lot of different interpretations, and at the same time also the enforcement of the rules is not always done on the same basis or the same at the same pace. And all of that contributes to the challenges linked to the inefficiency of the current rules and their implementation. Next slide, please. Then looking at the exports from the EU, and the picture is probably very common or familiar to you, unfortunately. A lot of waste, including waste that is shipped from the EU, gets dumped or gets mismanaged at destination. What we found as a driver for this problem is that the rules as we have currently implement them are not sufficiently clear. There's also a lack of control and inspection of these rules, and that has much to do with, of course, a lack of resources often, but also the unclarity of the rules. The more clear your rules are, the better or the easier it is to enforce them. Next slide. That brings me to the third group of challenges, and that is linked to the enforcement of the rules. And the fact that there is an increasingly illegal activities linked to the shipment of waste. And what we found is that more and more this is also a phenomenon that is linked with organized crime. So it's often not isolated to the shipment of waste itself. It's often linked with drug traffic, with human trafficking. But unfortunately, the waste trafficking is an increasingly serious problem of illegal activity. The problem that we've found with the current regulation is, again, an insufficient enforcement, a lack of transparency in the whole waste supply chain. And so that is also what one of the problems that we've tried to address in our review. Next slide, please. So what we've done with all those findings is that we and also politically, the signal was given in 2019 that from the EU side we have to take responsibility of our waste, and we cannot continue to export our waste challenges to third countries and damage the environment and the public health there. So the objectives of the review want to address this. First, to make the rules, the procedures more clear, to harmonize them, to harmonize their implementation. That should boost the waste going to recycling, should boost a market for secondary raw materials and a circular economy. At the same time, we want to guarantee that waste is only shipped to a country that is willing to receive that waste and that can manage this waste in an environmentally sound manner. If that is not the case, the waste cannot be exported there. And of course, thirdly, and that is both for intra and extra EU shipments, is to better tackle illegal shipments. Next slide, please. So in 2021, we tabled a proposal for a new regulation from the Commission side. In the EU, the process for this is that the Commission takes the initiative, tables a legislative proposal, and this is then considered by both the Council, so the group of member states, and the European Parliament. In parallel, they will discuss this. They are now in the process of discussing this. And in the end, we'll try to come to a compromise which would result in a new regulation. When we tabled from the Commission side our proposal, we also issued a communication which explains briefly what is the thinking behind this proposal, but also puts this in a more broader perspective. I can recommend for you to take a look at this communication. It's 8 or 9 pages. It's not a very long document, but we tried to put a broader context on the whole issue of waste shipments and how we want to take and we aim to take our responsibility for our own waste. Next slide, please. Of course, the most important piece of the proposal was the regulation itself, the proposal for regulation. This proposal is accompanied with this communication, as I explained, but also an impact assessment, which is a kind of a study, a report that looks at all the options that we had before us, and then we explain there with the scientific explanations what would be the impacts of each of those options, and based on that we explain why we made the proposal as we made it. So you can find in this impact assessment data on waste shipments, predictions on what would be the impact, both economically, socially, and environmentally, of the different options, and also for the preferred option that resulted in this regulation. Next slide, please. What I will briefly do now is to go through the three groups of measures linked to the objectives and linked to the challenges that I've explained before. So explain very briefly, because it's a very complex and huge piece of legislation. I don't want to go into all of the details, but I will highlight the most important measures linked to intra-EU shipments, to the export of waste, and to the enforcement of waste shipment rules, and then go a bit more into detail as regards the export of waste and the new regime that we propose. So on the level of the intra-EU shipment, but of course this has a more wider effect, because this concerns mostly the PIC procedure, the prior informed consent procedure, and how we try to harmonize this and improve its functioning. That has a lot of effect on how we deal with our waste shipments intra-EU. Most of the EU waste that is shipped moves around within the European Union, but as I indicated, also a lot of export and import of waste is done, and also there these procedures are of course relevant. The most important shift that we propose is a shift from the paper-based logic that is taken now. So the sending around papers, filling them, completing them, signing them, and then forwarding the copies of them. We want to go to an electronic exchange of those informations and data. So that involves digitalizing the whole procedure, making sure that systems are in place in member states on the ground where industry can connect to, where competent authorities can connect to, and then all the procedure can be handled through that electronic system. There is a wide support for this idea, but of course the devil is in the detail. The whole system, the whole software development, we are intensively developing this at the moment. And yeah, we are confident that in a few years' time we will be ready to move from paper-based procedures to an electronic data interchange. A second important issue is that we found that a lot of classification of waste is often done differently in different member states. And what we propose is that we would have in the future tools to distinguish better between what is green listed or non-hazardous waste and hazardous waste. And that is meant to avoid that different approaches occurring in different member states with all the discussions that are related and all the delays that come with it. And then finally, we want to better align the rules with the whole idea of going to a circular economy and implementing the waste hierarchy. So making sure that waste shipments are facilitated if they go to recycling rather than going to landfill. And one of the proposals that we make is that by default there should be no shipments of waste to landfill unless there is really no other solution for the waste in question. Next slide, please. Yeah, just a small detail maybe, but that is to make sure that we arrive with a system to electronically handle the procedures that will be available and will be complete. We want to have 2 years after the adoption as a transitional period to make sure that all of this gets in place properly. Next slide. So on the exports of waste outside the European Union, 4 main elements here. Maybe first on the right top, export to OECD countries. This is because of the fact that there is an OECD decision that regulates within the OECD area shipments of waste. But we feel that there is also there a challenge. Some OECD or some waste streams end up in OECD countries outside the European Union, where we already receive signals that there are issues with the management. The management of the waste that is important itself, or because of the imports of waste, domestic waste management systems start to fail in certain countries. And a very well-known example is Turkey, which is at the moment one of the top destinations, if not the top destination, for exported waste outside the European Union. So what we propose there is to some kind of a safeguard mechanism where we in the future can launch a specific procedure to get in a dialogue with that country or with a given OECD country to see how the things can be improved without immediately banning all exports of the waste. On the left top, export to non-OECD countries. At the moment, we have the approach that we reach out to all non-OECD countries outside the European Union and question or inquire about the rules that these countries want to apply to green listed waste. As I've indicated, hazardous waste or all waste that is covered by the Basel Convention is banned for export from the European Union. As regards to green listed waste, we inquire all non-OECD countries, what is the rules that you want to apply? And this is all these replies are collected in a specific regulation, the 1418/2007 regulation. But we found that this regulation is at the moment not functioning well. It's rather outdated. The updates do not happen regularly enough. It is not clear enough how these the provisions in this regulation can be enforced well enough. So what we now propose is to repeal this specific regulation as soon as the new waste shipment regulation comes into place, and to install a new approach. What we proposed is that by default, no green listed waste can be exported any longer to non-OECD countries outside the European Union, unless such countries step forward, actively come to the European Commission, indicate that they are willing to import all or certain waste, and also demonstrate that they are able to deal with that waste in a sustainable manner. I will come back to how this would work more in detail in the next slide. What we would do is to check all of these applications and then come up with a list of countries where the export of waste would in principle still be allowed. On top of that, and that's on the bottom left, we propose new obligations for the companies that export, because of course the first layer is on a country level. We want to make sure that the country as such is ready to receive waste or willing to receive still waste. But also the individual shipments by companies, we feel that there is a strong responsibility also for those exporting the waste. And also on a facility level, there should be a verification of the environmentally sound management of that waste. What we propose is that an exporting company from the EU ensures that the destination facility outside the Union, and that is both for non-OECD and OECD countries, that it is ensured that this company is audited according to a number of conditions that is also listed in the regulation. I will also come back to that in more detail in the next slide. And then one final element, what is a very specific challenge for the export of waste, or for the shipment of waste more in general, is the distinction between what is a used or second-hand good and what is waste. We have in the European Union a legal framework to distinguish between used electronic equipment and e-waste. But there are more waste streams where this challenge can occur. A few examples are textiles, what is a used garment versus what is something that can no longer be reused and is really waste. Vehicles is another example where what is really an end-of-life vehicle, what is a second-hand vehicle that can still be used in an environmentally sound manner. So what we propose is that we can also establish in the future binding criteria to make that distinction for specific waste streams. All of this regime, because it will take time to establish a list of countries, it will take time to get all the auditing schemes in place. We propose a transition period of 3 years. Next slide, please. So first, a little more detail on the assessment of countries, non-OECD countries outside the EU, where waste export would still be allowed. So what would be expected from countries in the non-OECD area is that they make a request to demonstrate a number of elements, to demonstrate that the waste management in their country is as we then worded in the regulation, broadly equivalent to the standards that we expect in the European Union. A few elements are that there should be a comprehensive waste management strategy or plan that covers the entire territory and shows the ability to ensure that the waste is environmentally sound managed. With that, a legal framework to support this waste management strategy should also be in place. We also want to make sure that the country is a party to a number of relevant multilateral environmental agreements, and the most known or what comes first to mind is the Basel Convention, of course, but also Minamata, Stockholm, the Paris Agreement, a number of other relevant environmental agreements. We want to make sure that the country in question is a party to that. And also that the country takes the necessary measures to implement all of the obligations under those agreements. And then a fourth element is, of course, the element of enforcement of all of those rules and the strategies that are in place, and to make sure that facilities are inspected, that the waste management system is controlled and is enforced, and the rules are enforced. With this presentation, I have included a number of extracts from the proposal in the notes. So if this presentation is shared, you can have a look in more detail to what is meant with, for instance, the strategy or the legal framework, etc. Next slide, please. Then on the obligation on the EU exporting companies to ensure that the facility at destination is audited. As I said, the exporter has to ensure that the facilities at destination will manage the waste properly, and that these facilities have been subject to an audit. That does not mean that every exporting company has to perform or has to commission a audit of the facility it wants to export to, because it might be that this facility was audited already for other purposes. So what we want to make sure is that the facility has undergone a audit, and that this can be presented. The audit report can be presented when asked for by an enforcement agent or an inspection agent. The audit has to be performed by an independent and accredited third party to make sure that this is really an independent audit. And it has to verify the compliance of that facility with a number of criteria. We lay them down in an annex. And again, in the notes to this presentation, I've included some more details of what we propose in that annex. So you can have a look if you're interested. If there is no such audit that was done, the export of waste to that facility is simply not allowed. So it's prohibited. Next slide, please. A final group of measures that we propose, and that is linked to tackling illegal shipments. What we have seen is that there are a number of provisions in the current regulation. They are all grouped in one article. It's a bit of a maze, a labyrinth to find your way through it. So what we've done is propose a better structure to make it a bit more clear. That is a bit of a formalistic approach. But we've also tried to strengthen the provisions on inspection and penalties to make sure that waste shipments are inspected, and that if something is found that is proven to be illegal, that the penalties are deterrent enough. What is also important, and that should always continuously be strengthened, is the coordination and the cooperation between enforcement agencies within the Union, but also beyond the borders of the European Union. And so what we propose is to have a more structural coordination and cooperation on EU level, and that takes then the form of a waste shipment enforcement group, which would of course incorporate all the member states enforcement agencies, but also we aim to have a more broader approach and include and invite also international bodies, if that is relevant, to really look at what are the challenges with the enforcement of waste shipment rules, and how can we strengthen them, and can we prioritize, and can we coordinate better to make sure that the waste shipment enforcement even gets better and more efficient. And finally, to all of that, to support all of that, we have in the European Commission an anti-fraud office, which is the abbreviation is OLAF, that already has a competence to look into or to investigate cases of illegal shipments when there are third countries involved. So in the case of exports of waste, OLAF already plays a role, is active in some specific cases. But what is lacking is for them to have also this role within the Union, so within the EU. And that's what is proposed to make it clear that OLAF can support enforcement action in member states for the whole track of the shipment from within the union to outside the union and vice versa. And yeah, I think that was my last slide. Next, yeah. Yeah, of course, if there are any questions, I'm here to try and give you a response. But before doing that, I mean that's not really in a slide, but I already briefly referred to the co-decision process. So this is the process in the union when the Commission has tabled a proposal for new legislation. Member states in the Council have a look at this, discuss this, and amend this according to their wishes. And the same is done by the European Parliament. That is at the moment ongoing. The European Parliament plans to vote on their amendment proposals by the end of this year. The council is also looking at the proposal, but it's that the timing there is not that clear. But the idea is to next year, the start of next year, to go to so-called trilogues, which means that Parliament and Council and Commission sit together and will try to compromise on a final regulation that will be then adopted. So that's in a nutshell where we are process-wise. And if there are any questions, I'm very happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Jörg, for making time and for providing so much very useful information on the new proposed regulation, the reasons behind it, and also on the ways forward and what it involves for the destination countries. And it's really great to have all the information on the long documents and legislative proposal presented in such an accessible and very straightforward way. Thanks a lot. I'm just encouraging anyone who has questions, please raise your hand or put your questions in the chat. And I realize I misspelled like raise your hand. Yeah, anyone wants to start? If not, I do have questions on my end. Maybe I should start with my question, because I was wondering, for example, very often in the illegal waste trafficking, you have a system where there are a lot of brokers involved, and they are transshipping the waste and through different countries. Sometimes it's not physically happening, but you cannot really determine where the waste is coming from, and sometimes the waste is redirected during the shipment. And it is in what you presented. It is mentioned that the exporting companies, they have certain obligations, and they will need to do the proper assessment on the recipients, on the recycling companies for receiving the waste. Is there anything that will tackle that broker issue that's happening currently?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, indeed, that is a reoccurring point of discussion, whether we should limit the role of brokers and dealers, or even limit the amount or the number of transfers you can do, because that is often happening, that one broker hands over the documents, even because they've often physically never touched the waste. So the documents and the waste is handed over numerous times, and the traceability gets a bit lost. That is a serious challenge. On the other hand, and we've carefully considered all of these ideas to limit the number of transfers, or even to limit the role of brokers and dealers. But this is a reality that a lot of the trade in goods, and that's not only for waste, is done through dealers and brokers. And to simply ignore that reality, that's also not feasible. So this is indeed still a struggle. What we do believe is that with all the measures that we've proposed to first strengthen the procedures through the electronic data interchange. So the traceability and monitorability should increase significantly because all of the data should be in the system. If it's not, it is very clear that this is an illegal activity. But if it is in the system, the traceability should increase considerably. And then all the strengthening of the rules for export, including the audit of the destination facility and the fact that any broker or dealer should also have this audit report available when he's controlled or is inspected. And on top of that, all the strengthening of the enforcement, including the role of our anti-fraud office that really has good experience in investigating the more complex cases, where often that is the case when brokers and dealers are involved. The complexity also increases. So we believe that all of that should really provide for tools to really better address this.
Thank you so much, Jörg. That's a very clear answer. And we have a question in the chat from Frederica from Interpol. Frederica, please ask your question. If you can unmute yourself and ask the question yourself. Frederica, can you hear me, or you want me to ask the question? Okay, so yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I've seen the question in the chat, and I understand the question is concerning the auditing of waste treatment facilities in the destination countries. Who is supposed to appoint the auditor, and who should pay for the audit? That is also something we have been looking into when preparing our proposal. What we now propose is the obligation there legally to have to ensure that an audit was carried out. What we did not want to do is to provide work, because when discussing this with industry, who already is our industries already, recycling industries, waste management industry, already is looking into, is preparing for them. They themselves see this as a tool to for themselves increase the traceability, to provide more transparency from their end also, and this is done according to practices that are more broadly familiar to industry, how to audit, not only for this purpose but for many purposes. So that's the approach that we've taken, just to put the general conditions that need to be audited. How the details of how this audit is carried out, we leave that to the market. What we have heard when discussing with Council and Parliament, there were many questions along the lines of this question. So how would it look like? Wouldn't it be useful to have more detail? So we are ready to look into this, but this is part of the ongoing co-legislative process. So it might be that we still add some, or Council and Parliament still add some detail to this auditing scheme. On the specific question here, who is to appoint the independent auditor? That is something for every and each national system who has, we understand globally there in every country there is national accreditation for auditing schemes is present. So we would rely on those. And who would pay for the audit? That is for the private actors that want to export the waste. And what we've also included in our proposal is exactly the situation where a destination facility, which would be the destination for two exporting companies, let's say A and B, and the audit of the destination facility was carried out and paid for by company A. Then company B should get in touch with company A and find out how they can commercially deal with this, maybe contribute a little in the cost for audit, in a fair manner, of course. This should not become a trade or a business in itself to start selling and buying audit reports. But at the same time, we want to avoid that the same facility is audited multiple times. So an audit report, if it is available, it could be shared by many by more than one company. But the cost itself should be borne by the private sector.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Frederica.
Sorry, I apologize. I had an issue with my microphone earlier, but I want to thank you, Jörg, for your reply and explain the reason why I asked this question is that I'm probably biased by the fact of working in Interpol, and so I look mainly at the legal side of the waste management process. And we know that fraud, including financial and document frauds, are the most common offense associated with waste crime. So I think this new practice of the auditing process is definitely something we should keep an eye on, because I can see a lot of opportunities for frauds in this process. And that's why I was curious to see how much public authorities are involved in the appointment of the auditors, and the fees are probably something that may create, let's say, a market for false accreditation, false auditing processes. So it's a good heads up for enforcement to keep an eye on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frederica. We have another question in the chat. Kunsurion, would you like to ask the question yourself, or you want me to ask it for you? Okay, so I'm going to... Oh, please go ahead. Kunsurion, can you hear us?
Good afternoon. I want to know what is any mechanism available to know if the smuggling of waste. You understand?
Yeah, your sound it's a bit weak. So if I can maybe repeat what you said, if it's any mechanism in place now for the smuggling of waste before this regulation comes into force. Is that correct?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, Jörg, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, indeed. At the moment, of course, what we try to do with the proposal for a new regulation is to improve things, which does not mean, and I should have said that at the start, maybe in our evaluation, we found that the current regulation does work. It does provide for the procedures that are there. It does provide also for enforcement tools. So at the moment, there is a lot of enforcement, and I've seen some colleagues online in this webinar that are actually active on the ground on a daily basis to really look into individual waste shipment and see if something illegal is ongoing. What is an ever existing challenge also for the EU and its member states is a lack of resources, often a lack of political priority given to the enforcement of environmental law and more specific, but at the same time, every day, enforcement inspection agencies in the member states are intensively performing inspections, doing controls, opening containers, etc. So that is at the moment already ongoing. What we want to add is a layer of support and prioritization and coordination, as I've explained, but that does not mean today there is nothing in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jörg, for your question, for your answer, sorry. And any other questions? Everything was crystal clear. To me, if I can ask another question, Jörg, because I think it's very exciting to hear about the software development that is going to happen along with the entry into force of this new regulation. and electronic data interchange. Is that for that's only for sharing within the European Union, or it's going to be shared also with other countries, for example, the destination countries?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question indeed. But what we are now doing is focusing on intra-EU shipments and to make sure that all member states, competent authorities, get connected through the systems that are already in place, because some of the member states or regions in member states already have electronic systems in development, because they are not the full-fledged system would really exchange all data electronically. While at the moment there's still some kind of a hybrid handling in some member states, where they print a PDF and then send this still physically to the other competent authority. But so there is already a lot of things in development. What we want to develop, what we want to end up with, is a system that interconnects all the existing national systems. And in those cases, there are also member states that do not have a national electronic system in place at the moment, and they will rely on a Commission-built system, so a system that is run by the Commission. All of that is now in development in close cooperation with all of the member states' competent authorities to really make sure that everything interconnects. But at the same time, because we will have this central part that is being run by the Commission, where member states' competent authorities can log in and use that system, that would also be available for third countries. If they want, they can connect their own system, of course, according to the specifications that will be laid down in specific rules. Or they can directly connect to the central system. We have taken that already into account to offer this. And what we've also been active in the last few years is in the Basel Convention. There is also a process to look into how we can digitalize the whole PIC procedure, the whole prior informed consent procedure, on a more global level. And also there we have been actively offering our experiences and the systems that we are, or to give some insights in how we are developing this change, the shift to an electronic exchange. So that is really our intention to as much as we can to offer this also to third countries.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jörg. I think this is great news and can be also used as a model by other regions in the world who are dealing with waste. As I think there are so many places right now that would need such system. I would like to see if anyone has other questions. I don't see any hands.
I have a question. One question.
Please go ahead, Amelia.
Yeah. I wonder if there is illegal. Yeah. We have already in Indonesia. We have already the regulation that every shipment that exported to our country has to be inspected, and then the inspector is point out by the Ministry of Trade. So if because the procedure for the inspection is not all the container, only 30% of the container will check by the inspector before shipping to our country. And if there is any illegal, we make the importer ship the container back to the origin country. So the question is, if the case like this happen, when the exporter is from EU, what is any requirement you need to receive this container? For instance, do you need the court order for this, or what other requirement you need that this country willing to receive the illegal shipping? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I understand your question is on the case where from yours, so from the side of Indonesia, it is discovered that a shipment has arrived illegally, and this shipment should be sent back to the country of origin. And what is required to make that happen? We have actually in our current regulation we have a set of provisions, articles in the regulation that regulate the whole take back of waste, and that is a part of the regulation that we have actually not really touched upon. That remains the same as because that is really detailed already. It also deals with exactly your question. What is the whole procedure to initiate this take back? If there is a court order necessary, I'm not sure. What is in the first place necessary is an indication from the importing country side, and of course that has to be underbuilt with or underpinned with some documentation and proof that the shipment has arrived illegally. And then what we also provide is a number of provisions how to deal with the costs for that take back, because of course that has a cost. And what typically happens is that a lighter notification procedure is initiated to make sure that the waste shipment that returns to a new member state is accompanied by the proper documentation to make sure it also arrives back properly. So a court order that's of course one tool, but that's not in every case necessary, I think.
Okay, thank you.
We have more questions. First, Katie, and then Ulrich.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aaron. I was just going to probably say what Ulrich was about to say. I don't want to anticipate him, but just to say, yeah, we don't necessarily need a court order, but just a formal letter indicating that you need a repatriation process, outlining the facts of your investigation so far, and then we would be in touch with you formally, and we would have a requirement to bring the waste back within 30 days where possible, though we might ask for an additional amount of time just because of the logistics of bringing waste back from Indonesia. I don't know if Ulrich wants to add anything.
Not actually. That was completely what I was going to say. The documentation we need for return shipment is once pictures of the waste, your waste classification, so we can see why it is a non-legal waste shipment, and all the information which enables us to identify the sender of the waste. This is quite important because we need, well, even as a state, we take it back, but we still need someone within our state or country to oblige to take it back, which makes it much faster and easier. So as thorough as the documentation as possible, but actually a court order is not necessary. It would mean that if there's a dispute between us and you, that would require a court order. But in most cases, I think this can be clarified by pictures and the description of the waste. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Katie and Ulrich, for your clarification. And I think the discussion is getting very interesting by the time we need to close the webinar. But we can take one or two questions if anyone has more questions.
There's a question in the chat.
Okay, thanks a lot, Flo. We have Agamutu. Do you want to ask your question or should we read it for you? So the question is, what mechanism is in place to ensure the waste coming into developing country is not mismanaged? Currently, 50 to 70% of plastic waste is mismanaged. Jörg? I know you covered some of this, but please.
Yeah, of course. Sure. Thanks for that question. And indeed, we are well aware, and we've become well aware over the last few years, even more, that plastic waste is really a challenge. And one of the more important decisions that was taken was in 2019 for the Basel Convention to include more plastic waste under the controls of the convention. So only if the waste is really clean and it's a mono stream of only one polymer, for instance, then it can be still freely traded. All other waste is more controlled. What we've done in the EU, and that's what I refer to, of course, hazardous plastic waste. It's banned for export to non-OECD countries. So if we come across such a shipment, that's very clear. That's an illegal shipment. But also the mixed plastic waste that is under the new code Y48. And that is typically what is collected from households. If no sorting happens and all plastic is still mixed and dirty, and that is also banned for export to non-OECD countries. So that is one step to clarify the rules. Of course, then you have to enforce the rules still. What we've done in the EU is to, with the member states, come to an interpretation of what is almost free from contamination, because that is one of the more important qualifiers to classify waste as clean enough to be still freely traded. And we've taken on the approach that there should be no more than 2% of contamination or other types of waste in a consignment of plastic waste, or 2% more than 2% of other polymers than what is actually the consignment of plastic waste. That's also one way of making it more strict, more possible to more strictly control and enforce such shipments. And then I can only refer again to the tools that we currently apply to enforce waste shipments. And indeed, it is an everlasting challenge. We cannot check every in each container, but and we have colleagues online, so they can complement what I'm explaining now. There are ways of making good assessments of what are those containers or shipments that should be controlled as a priority, basing ourselves on customs declarations, on other information that is collected. So that is on a daily basis intensively carried out. But that does not mean that still too much plastic waste ends up in vulnerable countries and is mismanaged there. And so also there I can only refer to my explanations that I've done. Our proposal aims to strengthen from our side the controls and the rules on that. But as I said, maybe colleagues on the ground can add to this. Thanks.
Thank you again, Jörg, for your answers. So I think we came to the end of the time allocated for this webinar, and I want to thank again Jörg for your amazing presentation and for all the answers to very interesting questions. Thanks everyone for joining. And in terms of what happens next, we are going to put the recording and the presentation on the Mobilize platform. But you can also, if you don't have access to them for whatever reason, you can reach out to us to ask for the presentation, and also feel free to share those within your teams with your colleagues from customs enforcement, prosecution offices, or regardless of the department of sector of waste management that you are working in. And we are going to have other webinars later this year in October and December. One will be, we will have UNITAR talking about their work on electronic waste, and towards the end of the year, our colleagues from UNODC in Vienna talking about the new legislative guide on waste trafficking. So please stay tuned, and we are going to be back with other interesting webinars in the future. Thanks a lot, and have a wonderful afternoon or evening, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you as well. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.